and welcome to the 2021 Global Security Forum, Competing for the Future. I'm Megan Torrey, the CEO of the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. This is our first event back since the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. We are hybrid. Today, we have about 125 people in the room and 200 people watching from around the United States and around the world. So this is really cool. We're really excited to have you, and I really want to give a special welcome to our students that are here today from the United States Naval Academy and the United States Military Academy, especially because the theme this year is competing for the future. And you are our future, and we're so happy to have you here today. My job is very simple. I get to thank all of the wonderful people that made this happen. And so I want to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors, Stanley Black & Decker, Pratt and Whitney, Sikorsky, Colt, KPMG. But I want to give a special thank you to our brand new partner this year, Wounded Warrior Project. We're so proud to be partnering with them this year and hopefully well into the future. And I really want to encourage everyone to sort of become familiar with their work. None of this happens without partnership, and we're so excited to be partnering with the Connecticut Center on Advanced Technology and Ron Angelo today. And especially proud to be here in the Connecticut Science Center. And knowing that they have their gala tomorrow night it makes it even more special to us that, Matt, that you're welcoming us here to Global Security Forum. So I'm gonna introduce Matt Fleury, the President and CEO of the Connecticut Science Center. Matt.
Thank you, Megan, and congratulations to you and your team for an extraordinary job and an incredible panel and a conversation I look forward to very much shortly. Also thanks to your board led by Peter Kelly over here on my left. It is always a great pleasure to see you, sir. And I know all of us are grateful to you for your continued leadership in the various capacities in which you lead in our community, including this one. On behalf of the Connecticut Science Center, welcome to the forum and to the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. Like anyone viewing the assembly of minds in this forum, I observed, well, if we are to tackle and solve the world's problems, this is probably a pretty good group to do it. And I doubt any of you would disagree now in anticipation or well after the session and the series of sessions that we've had here this week. But then I also was thinking about the idea that what the World Affairs Council is really about is about public engagement in the conversation more broadly, and the reality that as smart as the smartest people are, it's the broader engagement of the public that really is going to be the answer to our world's challenges, not only today in this moment by us, but by those generations who follow, these upstairs and those way upstairs who are even younger throughout the Connecticut Science Center every day, engaging in science, technology, engineering, and math, innovative thinking, critical thinking, all the things we want for them, and that which will be necessary to make this a better world after we've done our level best to give them a better start than I think some of us feel we have of late. I think it's in recognition of the importance of public engagement at every age level that the panel and those who they represent have been part of our work here at the Science Center, the engagement of young minds in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. It's great to see Tom Prete here, Pratt and Whitney, Jeff Hunt, who works with Tom, serving on our board for just that reason. The work that Sikorsky and Lockheed support that we do with STEM education for teens. And you know, Ron Angelo at CCAT and I have very frequent conversations about the workforce pipeline needs, the innovative needs of our state and our culture and our economy. And it's great to see you here today as well, Ron. And welcome to Connecticut. It's you know, a state in which General Dynamics is really not far away, as you found today in your drive up. So welcome as well. So with that, I just want to also recognize one more individual who's involved in the programs, Mark Maybury, who serves on the board at the Science Center for Stanley Black & Decker. Thank you, Stanley, for supporting this conversation, and I look forward to hearing it. So I'll get out of the way here and just say how grateful we are to have you in the building in person, how hard we've worked to make this safe and enjoyable for thousands and thousands of people throughout the pandemic, and particularly in the last year as things have gotten better. And thank you for complying with our protocols, which as an audience member in 5 seconds, I will be adopting myself when I find my mask. So thank you. Enjoy the program.
Welcome, everybody. So I'm Mike Moeller. I have the great privilege of kicking us off, as Megan said, for our first in-person event of the week for the Global Security Forum. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be here with all of you and see 4 generations of strategic thinkers. I mean, it is really amazing to me how powerful it is to see here, to see all of you here. So thank you for coming out and spending time with us in person. I was going to say Zoom is great, but I can't do that. But I can say that the difference of being able to come together in person is a very, very powerful. It's so powerful, and I think we've lost a little bit of that. We're starting to get it back. So again, thank you everybody for being here. Really appreciate it. So being here in person leads to such a richer conversation, especially during this time of strategic upheaval. You know, in a period of a great power competition, the U.S. has to do everything possible to retain its leadership role in the world. The world needs America's global leadership. We're stronger, the world is safer and more prosperous when there are more democracies than autocracies. To preserve our status, however, in this great power competition requires us to focus on national security and our ability to overcome these rapidly evolving threats. It will take innovative ways, new capabilities, different ways of thinking to maintain the international order and secure blessings of freedom and liberty for ourselves and for the world. Our nation's future and security relies on a strong and vibrant industrial base to maintain our economic and military advantages far into the future. Connecticut, here, is the perfect place to have an event like the Global Security Forum. We have such a significant industrial presence across the state. So many innovative companies that are working on the cutting edge of technologies and improvements. You'll hear from some of the senior leaders in just a few minutes. I'm really looking forward to gaining their insights from these thought leaders and how their companies plan to ensure the U.S. is positioned to effectively compete for the future. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce Ron Angelo, president of the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. He will serve as the moderator for the first time. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. It's great to see you. Thank you. Thank you to Megan and the World Affairs Council for organizing this powerful and very timely event. I'd also like to thank Matt Fleury for his leadership at the Connecticut Science Center and for hosting this insightful program. Competing for the future starts right here in this building. In this building, by inspiring creative and bright minds to pursue the STEM fields that will enable us to innovate and develop technologies of the future. As you just heard from Lieutenant General Moeller, competing for the future is a commitment that the U.S. must make now and sustain in the new era of global conflict. Competing for the future, never in our history have these words been more important. Competing for the future resonates from our classrooms to the boardrooms of the most powerful and influential industrial corporations on Earth. and competing for the future. It's the world we live in now, but it's also the world we have been living in for several decades. For generations, the U.S. has been the dominant power throughout the most industrial sectors. That is the reality of the past, and this past success is no guarantee of our future performance. Decades ago, without geopolitical competition, the U.S. became complacent and altered its values and principles regarding what is important, offshoring manufacturing, and the innovation, research, and development embedded in those processes. The recent pandemic and the inability of the U.S. to source critical supplies to care for our own citizens, and the crisis the U.S. faces by producing only 12% of the chips it requires for nearly everything we touch throughout our day, are the result of gross miscalculations of which the consequences are now at our doorstep. But we sit here today at the intersection of emerging technologies, innovation, and national defense. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, dozens of sophisticated digital thread technologies and autonomous systems are transforming the U.S. defense industry's approach to military modernization strategies and shifting battle theaters. The U.S. must continue to innovate, develop, and deploy advanced systems that have the ability to discern risks, plot strategies, and take decisive action in mere seconds. The U.S. government must also commit to the relentless development, validation, and adoption of leading-edge technologies and deploy efficient and seamless practices to continuously increase the technical capabilities of the entire U.S. industrial base. And most importantly, the small and medium-sized manufacturing and technology companies that are the backbone of our vital and literally our life-giving supply chain. While we all agree the U.S. adversaries have rapidly advanced their technologies, the technical capabilities over the last 2 decades, particularly in defense technology, cyber, and space, the U.S. has done a pretty damn good job advancing ourselves. For one, I look around the state and the region every day in awe by the technology, hardware, software, and platforms that are conceptualized, developed, constructed, and deployed by committed and passionate Americans to safeguard our country and interests around the world and beyond. So here we are today, sitting in Connecticut, the state with the 3rd smallest geographic footprint, to hear about a distinguished panel of experts representing some of the largest, most technologically advanced defense companies in the world that call Connecticut home. As I have previously stated, from the deepest depths of Earth's oceans to the surface of Mars and beyond, Connecticut industrial companies represented on this stage have met every technological challenge ever presented. And at this very moment are innovating and developing advanced technologies to meet the challenges of the future and beyond. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the panel, begin our discussion of how Connecticut companies, Electric Boat, Sikorsky, and Pratt & Whitney, are competing for the future to remain competitive and dominant in this ever-shifting defense landscape. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Ken Jeanos on the end. Ken is the Chief Information Officer at General Dynamics Electric Boat, where he is responsible for setting and executing the information technology strategic direction across all fundamental areas required to design and construct nuclear submarines for the U.S. Navy. Ken is also responsible for technical oversight of Electric Boat's emerging technology projects and Electric Boat's innovation programs. Ken joined Electric Boat in 2019 after 29 years at Panasonic North America, where he held the role of President and CIO/CISO. Ken's career culminated in the successful construction and implementation of infrastructure and systems to support the partnership with Tesla to build the first gigafactory to manufacture battery cells for Tesla's electric car fleet. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics from Montclair State University, an MBA in Strategic Planning and Marketing from Villanova. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Mike Ambrose, Vice President of Enterprise Business Transformation at Sikorsky Aircraft, a Lockheed Martin corporation, where he leads the effort to transform every aspect of the Sikorsky business to more efficiently and effectively execute future programs. Mike is a 37-year employee of Sikorsky Aircraft. Prior to his current position, Mike was Vice President of Engineering and Technology, and prior to that, he held diverse leadership roles, beginning with General Manager of the Rotors and Transmission Manufacturing Product Center, Vice President of International Military Programs, and Vice President at Aircraft Design and Manufacturing Engineering. Mike holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the University of New Haven and was recently awarded an honorary doctorate of engineering from UNH. He also earned a Master's of Science in Systems Engineering and Management degree from the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. Welcome, Mike. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Thomas Preet, Engineering Vice President at Pratt & Whitney. Tom has overall leadership responsibility for all technical activities related to military engine programs, including working with military engine leadership to create future product strategies, technologies and innovation, advanced military propulsion systems for the warfighter and their allies. Tom's responsibilities also include the on-time, on-budget delivery of critical program milestones and external customer requirements, as well as leading military airworthiness, product reliability and safety, production and sustainment support, and flight test support for Pratt & Whitney's development and operational fleet. Tom has been with Pratt & Whitney since 1989, holding a series of increasing leadership responsibilities in engineering, operations, aftermarket, and customer support. And under Tom's leadership, numerous certification and development milestones for the geared turbofan were achieved, and the F-135 propulsion system achieved U.S. Air Force and U.S. Marine IOC. Tom holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from UConn and a master's from Rensselaer and an MBA from UConn, as well as other distinctions. So at this time, I'm going to have a kind of a broad question to the panel that we'll start right down the line with you, Tom, but I want to provide some brief comments and remarks about how your company is approaching the urgency to innovate and remain competitive. So if you can just touch on that, and then we'll get to the specific questions.
Great. I'll start. First of all, I want to thank Matt and Megan for putting this together and hosting this, so thank you very much. I also want to recognize all the men and women in uniform here on the phone and all over the world. My job brings me to many bases, and I just am in awe every time I go to there to see their dedication and focus on the freedom that we enjoy every day. So thank you, and recognize that. I think what I'd like to do is just real start before we talk about how we're adapting for the future. I think we need to talk about why we got to where we are. Pratt & Whitney's been in business for 100 years, and if you think about 100 years. Long story short, roughly only 5% of the businesses that were invented in business in 1925 are still in business. So 5% of the Fortune 500 companies that would have existed in 1925 are in business. So we're in a rare breed. And you think about what keeps people in business for 100 years. It starts with passion for what you do. It starts with innovation in aviation, and that we've been doing that for 100 years, providing the warfighter what they need to protect this great country. And indeed, our founder was founded on the WASP engine, which basically won the war for the U.S. Navy in World War II. So innovation, we invest in people. Culture is a big thing for these types of companies that have longevity, specifically around being an ethical company, doing business the right way, and then finally remaining profitable. So those are the things we have to maintain as we go forward for another 100 years. Now, in talking about making sure we adapt to the challenges of the future, I would argue that we have to maintain connections with our customers. What does the warfighter need? What is the commercial engine needs? We just certified the geared turbofan, which is a 15% reduction in fuel burn and an equal amount of greenhouse gases. The F-135 powers the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, an amazing engine that we could talk about for hours. I could talk for hours. We don't have an hour. So staying connected and making sure we make the products that our customers need. Now, how you do that is you make sure you focus on the basics. Talent today, roughly, I'm going to say roughly 60% of the engineering workforce, perhaps more, is of retirement age. And less than 10%-ish of our demographics are young people coming out of college. That's going to switch quickly. So making sure we invest in the education, invest in the best universities to get the best talent is really, really important. And we are doing that. Focusing on diversity and inclusion, we are not going to be successful as a country unless we reap all the talents that we have in this country, whether it be engineering or technical. Everybody needs to be part of that, and the only way you do that is making sure everybody is welcome, everybody's voice is heard. So that's very, very important, is investing in the talent and bringing the talent in. Working on process, you'll hear a little bit today about the focus on speed with discipline. Our warfighter needs speed. No more can we wait for our adversaries to lag. They are moving at incredible speeds. We'll talk about that. We need to have speed with discipline, and you do that with agile development. You focus on your processes that bring the safe products to come to the warfighter, but at the same time making sure we have speed. And then finally, in digital technology, you'll hear a lot about that. Model-based definition, model-based systems engineering. These are things, tools that are available to us to go faster, speed with discipline. Those are the investments we make, along with the traditional investments in high temperature materials and digital manufacturing, connecting the design all the way through the life cycle without paper, with a digital thread.
Tom, thank you. Very insightful. Mike, how is Sikorsky approaching the urgency to innovate and remain competitive?
Well, I think Tom hit everything. And actually, you could have just put in Sikorsky instead of Pratt, and you would have got it.
Okay.
I think the other aspect is if you build upon this concept of speed, we all need to go a lot faster. And for companies that have been around for 100 years, like Sikorsky and Pratt, you really need to reinvent yourself on a frequent basis. And like I said, you've heard, I've been at Sikorsky for 37 years. I've been through about 3 or 4 of these cycles already. And in no time in my career have I seen the urgency that is forcing us to go and really just look at the way we do everything and do it completely different. Now, there's a lot of technologies today that didn't exist that'll enable that. We're going to talk about it. Tom mentioned some of them. But I believe that the other thing that's different is all these small companies, and I think the United States Air Force does the best job of all the services through Agility Prime and other means, say, look, we have to go a lot faster if we're going to stay up with the near-peer threats. And we look to these small companies and these venture capitalist-backed companies as a model for how the big corporations like Lockheed and Pratt, Raytheon, General Dynamics need to behave. So that'll be something we'll talk about more also.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And Ken, how about you?
So I don't know if the two gentlemen left a lot for me to say.
Well, you make submarines, so it's a little bit different.
It's a little different with the submarine. So what I'll do is I'll focus on one piece that Tom said, and I'll use the word resources. There's a major focus at Electric Boat on resources, whether it be human resources or facility resources and investments, right? So I joined the company in November of 2019 and immediately saw the awards of future business and the demands that's coming from the U.S. Navy for a critical product, the submarine, into the fleet, and then also the focus on the new Columbia fleet that we've already begun construction on. Recognizing the fact that we have to invest in human resources that comes to training and bring people and get the knowledge out of the people that have been there for a long time and make sure that we can get that and bring it into the new workforce and keep those people energized with the same type of commitment. Because there's one thing I'll use at Electric Boat that I've seen already: commitment to the workforce, and what they put out as far as a quality and a service delivery is matched by no one that I've come across before. Numbers, I could throw a lot of numbers around, but I mean, the numbers like a $1.7 billion investment in facilities to upgrade, not just facilities, but infrastructure across Electric Boat, of which more than half of that will be spent just here in the state of Connecticut, as we're trying to bring our yard up to the facilities that will allow the talent to come in and be able to perform to meet the challenges of this new innovation, because they can't innovate if they don't have the tools, can't innovate if we don't provide them with the training they need to do so, and challenge them to think differently. So it's a balance of a culture that I think is working right now, but I don't think that they're done. I think they're going to continue to work in that, but everything else that Tom said as well. We're also over 100 years old, so I should throw that out there. So.
one of the.
Well, thank you. I mean, it looks like, we're not surprised we have a common theme of workforce and how they're going to get upskilled and trained, but we're also talking a lot about the digital transformation, digital technologies now, and I'm sure that will make its way through this panel. But, you know, we are talking about technology, advanced technology, and certainly with Tom sitting here, technology and propulsion has advanced tremendously. So, Tom, the role of propulsion in air war, both historically and looking forward, is probably an interesting topic for this group. So, you'd like to hear your perspective on that.
In a nutshell, you know, they talk a lot about the history of Pratt & Whitney, and it's interesting because what's true then is true now. And Frederick Rentschler said many years ago that it's very obvious to him that only the best aircraft can only be powered by the best engine. And what he meant by that is that the most capable engine makes the most capable aircraft. So if you look at Pratt & Whitney's history, it started with the concept by Frederick Rentschler that I could make a lighter, more powerful engine. And it was not thought to be possible, so he came up with the WASP, which is the first air-cooled engine, and it basically changed aviation forever. He was right. He went home and quit his job that day. It must have been a tough discussion with his wife, and he started Pratt & Whitney, so thank God for innovators. So if you look forward in time, that engine went on to do many great things for the country and for aviation, but it was about thrust-to-weight ratio. Now you fast forward to the 1960s and the 70s, when you think about F-14s, you think about F-15s and 16s, it was all about thrust-to-weight ratio. It's about the ability to make as much thrust with the least amount of weight with the smallest hull, which is the less drag on the plane. And that's what makes, if you guys go see the Thunderbirds or my Navy friends, the Blue Angels, you'll see what those aircraft can do from a acceleration and from a turning radius and from a air-to-combat radius. So that's all great stuff. So then you fast forward into the 1990s and you think about the F-22, which is just a magnificent fighter, air superiority aircraft. It not only has the thrust-to-weight ratio, but brought in what else was needed at the time for the then Soviet adversary, which is stealth, the ability for this large aircraft to look very small and hide from aircraft, and at the same time have vectoring nozzles that are allowed it to do amazing maneuvers to avoid the other aircraft's adversary during a dogfight. Then you fast forward again to 2000, and the people of Pratt & Whitney developed the F-135, which is the Joint Strike Fighter, has all the attributes of thrust-to-weight ratio, has all the attributes of stealth for 3 different variants: the United States Navy, Marines, and Air Force. So then we answered the call again. So let's go fast forward to today. So one of the tyrannies of fighter jet engines is you have to balance thrust-to-weight with range, and range is always taking a back seat. And as always, as a designer, you've just accepted this trade of thrust-to-weight performance in range. Our warfighters are asking for more range, and we'll talk more about that today, why that is. And the people of Pratt & Whitney have come up with very innovative cycles to create not only an engine that has the thrust-to-weight ratio and the performance, but also amazing range to do what the warfighter does. And that's the sort of the backdrop and the tapestry I see going forward is the importance of those trades.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. And you mentioned Frederick Rentschler, and you think about these 100 years ago, and they didn't have supercomputers, they didn't have modeling, they didn't have these advancements. How did you innovate the way you did over those years without all the tools that we have today?
You didn't have PowerPoint. How did you actually communicate?
You didn't have PowerPoint, yeah. Thank you. Mike, your role, as I read through your bio, I couldn't even figure out what the task you have as hand, because it's got to be quite daunting. And how does that new role, though, play a part in the development of defense innovations in the rotorcraft industry that you're developing?
Yeah, Ron, really good question. It's interesting because until about 10 days ago, I probably had one of the top 10 business cards in Connecticut. I was the chief engineer of Sikorsky aircraft, the job that Igor Sikorsky had. And over the summer, I realized that for us to really get to the next level in terms of, we talked about the speed and the digital integration and really being able to go twice as fast and at a much more affordable cost, that we needed to change our company. We needed to change our business. And we've been doing a lot of stuff that Tom had talked about, but we needed to do it across the company. So I went to our president and I said, look, I'm volunteering to go lead the company on this journey, which we have to do really fast. And so that's how it came about. And I get asked every day, so what is it you do? And it really is to go and take our corporation, and through Sikorsky, we are actually going to be the lead for all of Lockheed Martin on this journey. So It is quite a lot of responsibility. I went from having 4,000 reports to having about 4, but I also have about 100,000 people helping me. Yeah.
Fantastic, very interesting. Well, we'd love to get some updates on that going forward, because that digital transformation, and really have to understand, how is it going to make its way into the supply chain? The supply chain has to be adopting at the speed
We'll
you
talk
guys
about
are.
that, yeah.
I know, we'll get to
good-
that
yeah,
soon.
yeah.
Ken, from your standpoint, electric boat, wasn't too long ago we were talking about what, a half a sub or a year, or a sub every couple of years. All of a sudden the Navy's saying, well, maybe you guys can build 3 subs a year. And I'm just trying to figure out, with that new demand from the Navy, how are you guys innovating, and what are you looking at? It's got to be all throughout the corporation. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll speak relative to the responsibilities that I have within the IT environment. We are looking at the fact that, to everyone in here, a cadence of about one boat a year is what we've been tracking over the years, and suddenly the demand is at least 2 of the current Virginia fleet, which is the fleet that we're delivering, and then now we've started the construction of the Columbia vessel, which will be the most advanced nuclear submarine available when it's delivered later in the decade. So now you're going to go from 1 to 3. We'll just use that number, and we believe the demand might go up even higher, right? What do we have to do? So I mentioned earlier about the investment in infrastructure, investment in people. The other way is the investment in relooking at how we're doing things today. So that's what I found this a very exciting time to join the company a couple of years ago, and trying to leverage some of the things that maybe are done in the private sector versus things that might be done in the sector of providing to the military. We have to take a look at some of the technologies that we have that have been around for quite a while that limit the employee to be able to do the things quicker, but focusing always on safety, right? The number one thing that we say is safety, right? It's a mantra that is drilled into us from the day we get there, is the safety of our sailors and their families. So we're looking at, and we may go into deeper discussion as we go further in this, people call it digital transformation, but I'd say we have to start with digital optimization. First, have to look at what we have internally and do that while we're also delivering vessels. So it's not easy to modernize an infrastructure while also trying to deliver not only on the cadence you were, but at an increased cadence. So we have some really good ideas. We have some really good people, partners that we're going to work with, and I think that we're putting some plans together as it relates specifically to those. So you mentioned earlier about the digital yard, you talk about paperless, you talk about all these processes that we have to get our arms around. And again, we've made some headway over the last year or so.
Yeah, thank you. And you touched on it just very briefly, but I know the safety of the warfighter is as big a commitment as your companies make. So that's obviously tremendous to keep those values up. Tom, for you, I want to get into a little about this, this whole competing side of things. So, what is your position, and what is your perspective when you talk about the U.S. near-peer competitors, and what is the U.S. doing about it? How are we responding? How are we staying ahead?
This is a great question we could talk for hours about. So, let me go back to when I started at Pratt. It was 30 years ago. Everybody got a clearance. They went into work, and they worked, and the adversary was the Soviet Union, and they had their certain timelines on when they developed stuff. But we were 2 separate societies. You had the sort of the Americans, and you had the Soviets. You had the Allies, and no one worked. There was no collaboration, right, by design. But the other piece of it is that, limited amount of money, and they would go at a pace, and we would outpace them, and we would go faster than them, and everything was classified. You go into the 90s and the 2000s, the walls came down. And then you think about our adversary now, specifically the government of China, and the embedness of all of our businesses, right? Everybody's tied together, right? So. And then you have an adversary that is state-sponsored. They have a tremendous amount of wealth going into jet engines to try to catch up. Not only in jet engines, but in aerospace. They have a will, right? A will is important. They have a national will to be at a certain level by a certain period of time, which is aggressive. And then they have IP rules that we don't necessarily agree with, and I could tell you for hours the unfortunate theft of IP in the jet engine world that has occurred. All that to say is the timeline where they are is much further along than anybody ever thought, and their trajectory to catch up is unprecedented. And that's not a joke, that's a fact. So you think about what do we need to do as a country. First of all, we got to lock down our IP, and we are doing that. the ability to make sure that nothing gets, to the extent we're able to, that the things we invent, the brain power we have, stays where it needs to be. Then finally, it's about going faster. It's about going faster. We can't take 8 years to design a new fighter engine. We got to do it in half the time at half the budget. And that's the way you stay ahead of the adversary. We could talk for hours about that, but that's the real reality of the situation that we're under as a country. But I think we understand we have to do differently.
Thank you, Tom. I know we're going to have a little time constraint, so I want to run through a few more. But again, staying on that theme, you, Mike, we're talking about as technology evolves and adapts, certainly in your particular area. How's your role at Sikorsky, and how is Sikorsky staying not just ahead but dominant in the work that you guys are putting out?
Yeah, a lot has to do with our commitment to innovation. So, through when we were part of UTC and now part of Lockheed Martin, we've invested over $1 billion on next generational technology. So how do you stay relevant? You have to stay ahead of the competition. You have to protect it, but you also have to understand where the world is going. And so these are things like operational analysis, which we do in concert with mostly with our Army customer, is to try to understand in rooms with thick lead walls in terms of where we think those scenarios are going. We use that data, those requirements, then to go and understand what type of aircraft is required to go operate in that environment. And when you see the technologies like you see with our X2 technology, that came about from looking at where our threats are going and what we need to do to be able to operate in those environments. Now, that was an investment by private industry, over $1 billion between us and our partners in our supply base, to go create that technology that we believe is the right technology for our warfighters. In addition to that, you also heard a lot about, even in my position, is that there's a technology aspect to it and the investments that go with it, but there's also a transformation of the business. And you need both, because it's not enough just to have the right technology. And so what I've been tasked to do, and what Sikorsky has been doing, is to connect this digital thread. That's a part of it. So that's where you use data and you try to do things concurrently, and you do it through simulation before you actually go and design it, before you build it, before you test it, before the customer has to go and sustain it. You're able to go through a lot more iterations to the fact of it's like, it's 50 to 75% faster, and you get better quality. So that's how you go from like 8 years to 4 years and able to bring these products to market. Because you have to be able to do it, and safety is in all our products. I think that's one of the things that makes the Connecticut industrial base different, is that we understand what it takes. It's one of our advantages versus a lot of like those venture capital companies, is that we know how to go and design, build, and sustain safe products that can then go and perform better than anything else. So it's tying all that together. It's the technology investments that private industry is making in concert, in coordination with our military, but it's also this transformation through digital applications on every part of everything we do. And you see a lot of the glamorous stuff around, what we do from a model-based definition, but there's a lot more behind it. The investments in high-speed, supercomputers. It's the investment in training. It's the investment in processes, because you can have the best technology and the best process, but if you don't understand how all that connects to the supply base, for example, it doesn't work. And so all that comes together, incredibly complex, but I think that's one of the things that makes the United States such a special place, is that we figure it out.
Well, I know we're working together on a lot of those things, so it's exciting to hear that kind of work being done in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Time for one more question, though, before we're going to turn it over to the audience for some of your questions. But Ken, you mentioned it first, I think, talking about digital technologies on your in your yard, and certainly putting together and manufacturing and assembling a submarine is pretty daunting. So when you talk about an optimized manufacturing process, how are the digital technologies that you guys are looking at and deploying going to help?
I mean, I would say the part that we have to put the most focus on is putting the information at the hands of the workers that are in the yard versus the paper type of processes that have gone on. How do we make their jobs a lot easier? How do we, enable a yard for them to be able to work, for example, with, handhelds and devices that they used to use paper and go through the yard in a ubiquitous nature to where they're not disconnected as they go through. And they're able to do their jobs faster and they're able to do their jobs with a more accurate nature as they go through that. So that is where we have to go. Where I would take this discussion a little bit is the challenges that we have that I've seen since I've been there is the nuclear aspect of what we have. And adopting some things that may be available right now, and some people may just say, well, those solutions are out there right now for you to use. We have a security posture that challenges every one of those that we would do, i.e. the cloud, and how we can use any of those applications to go and make our yards more digital or more efficient. What we want to do is, to the point of innovation, get innovation within EB, within the team, to bring our customer along the journey, right? So I think that they are interested in wanting to partner with us and say, how can we adopt these other applications or technologies without putting us at risk, because our data cannot be put at risk. And those same challenges work whether we're trying to connect the yard or whether we're trying to make data availability to everybody, right? So data as an asset that we can get to, but we have to make sure that that data is protected. So, and how do we get that data to be so accessible by so many through tools that would be acceptable on a security posture for ourselves and our customer.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. I think right now we're going to field some questions from the audience. I don't know where the mic is there, or are we just going to talk? But at this time, the panel, we're going to allot about 15 minutes or so to some questions from the audience. So we can pick you out a little bit with the lights, and looks like there's a gentleman over there. We can start right there.
I have a question for electric boat. Are you guys going to be involved in the nuclear effort in Australia with the nuclear submarines?
Yeah, I figured there'd be a question of that nature.
Yeah, we're talking about, he's asking about electric boats, activities that may take place with Australia in that submarine deal, and I don't know what Ken can comment on, but
Yeah, what I would say is it's too early in the process for us to really comment on what kind of involvement electric boat would be in there. Obviously, I'm sure there'll be a part of it of which we'll have to be, or we will offer to be a participant to assist. But as of right now, really our focus is the demand that's been put upon ourselves by the U.S. Navy to achieve something that we haven't been able to, we're not there yet with one vessel to 3. But I think it's publicly they announced that there was going to be a period of time of study, I guess, to pull through to see what people would participate in that and what needs would be. And again, I'm sure that if they have any of those questions, the Navy will bring us in to assist.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Hi, thank you. In the guts of all this transformation, digital transformation and networks, there's a fundamental dilemma between centralized versus distributed systems, such as how do you protect the data security in a distributed environment. But in many situations, you do want to have certain kind of distributed architecture. Could you comment?
Is that a question?
I think
for me?
it's
So I think in theory, I try to focus on something that's called a centralized governance model and a decentralized utilization or visualization, right? So basically, if we can set the security posture on the centralized governance model, and then put a role-based security posture around that to where we can see who could be utilizing or visualizing that data, it will allow it to be more distributed across the platforms to those roles. The biggest deterrent to something quickly is the quality of the data and the quality of the systems that are in there and the ability to define those data elements so that they can be accessible, and systems as well to be pushed through. The integrations to many legacy systems to newer technologies, how do we set up data dictionaries of clear, concise understanding of what it is you're looking at. So any decentralized utilization it has a risk of somebody not understanding what they actually have in front of them. So it's going to be a very hard balance, or not a hard, but it'll be a challenge that we're going to have. And hopefully, the theory I say, and it's very juvenile, is we have to go through a crawl, walk, run type of phase on this to make sure that we protect the assets we have internally.
And for all three of you, and feel free, Mike or Tom, to comment on that as well, because it used to be what you were all worried about or concerned about was your supply chain and how do you secure data, but now you've got remote workers, and probably have remote workers that are stay remote. How are you folks handling that?
But I think it's a great question. If I could broaden it a little bit, like all kinds of dilemmas, right? Go faster, speed with discipline. We heard that. More protection protects your IP, pushes you to classified types of work, which is very decentralized, right? It's very, but it's also expensive, it's slower, and it takes more time. So you have all these different types of effects happening all against each other. So I think that those are the types of things we got to tackle. Is how do you have speed with discipline in a classified area, right? It's another thing. The other thing I worry about is as more and more engineers start to understand what it is to be hybrid, to work from home, to have flexibility in their work environment, their work-life balance. Guys like me just went to work and you never went home, but now rightly so. I mean, the kids, they enjoy this, right? So now you're selling some of our best engineers. So, well, you're working classified programs, so I need you to go in every day, and their buddies are not. So how do we deal with that? That's another big challenge for the workforce, right? Is getting people to understand that their jobs require certain things, and sometimes those certain things aren't exactly what you want. And then you have the question of, are they going to stay with you? So I wish I had all the answers, but I know the problem.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, sure. There's a lot there, and I could see Tom's passion around that. And Ken really hit it. Is that for us, and really for defense industry in whole, is that it is about the planning, and is recognizing that there is risks. And so when you realize that there will be distributed systems that you have to support, whether it be remote workforce, and the reality that a percentage of our workers are never coming back, to working with suppliers. You heard me talk a lot about going fast, and that's a partnership with our military customers. So the military is also working through this, and how they have a centralized but distributed system with industry. And so when you look at all that, we do spend a lot of time on it and trying to make sure we have the right IP protection and cybersecurity. I think what you'll see is that we're still learning. And the key is that when you look at where cyber requirements are going, they're evolving all the time. And I think that's the key, is like, I don't think anybody has the answer, but the key is you just have to make sure you recognize it's there, and you're planning for it, and you're making sure you check yourself all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of us, including the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, have to get through the CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification over the next few years, which is a daunting process that we all have to deal with. I can't imagine in your shop I've got to worry about mine.
Yeah. And it's evolving
we all have
too.
that.
Yeah, what you have today won't be what it is 5 years from now.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Question over there, sir. Can you just hold that mic up so the audience can hear the question?
Yes, hi. Thanks for conducting the panel today. The question I have, I heard a lot about speed and the need for speed, and that's pretty clear, and you hear that in the military today too. What I'm wondering is, how do you achieve that as companies when you have to deal with the federal acquisition regulations, and in particular DFARS? They're not built for speed, and they're built for other things. I mean, is that something that's going to have to fundamentally change in the government, and how do we do that?
I'll take because
I'm sure you all.
And I'll be very careful how I say this too. But one of the things that has really, I think, changed the game is the OTA, other transaction agreements. It's created a lot of anxiety for industry, but it is an effective vehicle for being able to go faster, because a lot of when you look at the way we used to run big development programs and competitions in the past, is that you would have things like orgs to be flow down with requirements, and now it's more about industry, show us what you have, and then in concert with the military, there's an evolution of requirements all the time, looking at where our near-peer threats are, where the threats are, and how those have to evolve. In the end, it will end up with, you've got to follow the DFARS, but all that up front allows for a lot of flexibility to go and get the platform that the warfighter needs. So in the end, that DFARS are DFARS, but that front end is completely different than the way it was 20 years ago.
maybe I could throw something out there. This is another one of these, I know what the problem is, I don't know how to fix it, so if you think about how we do jet fighters today, you have this massive spec and it goes to Lockheed or Boeing or Northrop, and then that spec dissects into an engine spec, and that spec is like this, and you shall do this, and you shall do that, and you shall do this. And at the end of the day, each one tries to meet the spec, and you put the engine in together, and off it goes, and you get a great fighter jet, right? But imagine a world with model-based design where Pratt & Whitney's designs of their engines is in concert with the Lockheed or the Boeing or the Northrop, where you're optimizing the engine at the aircraft level. And if there isn't a spec, all it is the Air Force saying, I need it to do this, 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 and this. You guys go figure it out. And this floating spec where we're working together to actually, at the aircraft level, and then, then actually design the engine while you're designing the aircraft as one. Can you imagine the speed that would be worth? And I think that's, if I project where we need to go as a country, that we need to go there, but you can't go there unless the contracts allows you to do that, because we operate by the contracts. I try to go do something, I get my hand slapped, it's not the contract. So we have to change the way we think about this thing. And as we go to systems-based model engineering at the aircraft level, we'll have to figure out how you substitute the requirements so that you meet your priority, you get paid, but at the same time you optimize the aircraft to be as best and as fast as you can.
I think we have a question over here. If there's a mic. Oh, we have one up there first, then we'll come right down to you. You get close.
You hear me?
There you go, close.
In terms of competition, I'm sitting here, I'm not in the industry, I'm reasonably well educated and informed. I see the nonsense that just occurred with the Australians and the French. I'm concerned with the Taiwanese and the Chinese and the Filipinos. And who do you trust? I'm concerned about the aspect of the consequences of taking off the French and the European allies. Is that a potential problem going forward? I'm not enough familiar with the jargon you guys use between it among yourselves. From hearing that security is a massive problem and concern. And the more people involved in any group, the more likely it is that there's going to be some kind of breach. When I hear, for instance, that Microsoft has been hacked, that's some concern. How do you guys, what's the word I'm looking for, maneuver in that kind of environment? Who do you trust? Deal with the military. With all due respect to our military, they are among the best and sometimes most incompetent out there for any variety of reasons. The air is human. I don't envy what you guys are trying to do. I am really concerned that if there is an electronic mold, so to speak, in the system, like that people invented, by the time you figure it out, it's too late.
There's a lot there.
I'm not going to point. I'm not going to point to any of you.
Yeah, I was going to say you're probably the wrong people up here to answer some of that. But I will just let you know one thing. Yeah, is that we industry, we certainly, whether it be foreign military sales especially, we always work through the U.S. government. And when you talk about specific technologies, there's always a protection for what we would consider like crown jewels. I do think that the U.S. government does a very good job of understanding what differentiates our capabilities versus others around the world. So through that partnership and through those regulations, there is a means to go and make sure that even when we partner with a country and there's an industrial offset or obligation to go put work in that country, even for foreign military sales, there's always a distinction between what's considered a differentiating technology and what's considered more of a commercial technology. So that's just one. There was a lot in your but that would be one facet.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for taking that. I think we have one more time for at least one more question. We have one gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Walter Potts. I run the Naval Maritime Consortium. We work with supply chain development. We actually work with Angelo and good contracts BD right now in terms of improving and enhancing the supply chain so that we can better coordinate the supply chain to develop and innovate to support your guys' production schedules. One of the things you mentioned, Tom, was generative design and collaborative design between, you said for your example, for you all as propulsion experts working with the aircraft, Sikorsky, Lockheed. We're seeing the same thing in the supply chain, more assemblies rather than components being pushed out of the supply chain.
Yep.
Where do you find the greatest challenge, and where do you see the biggest constraint in terms of that process and that innovation being pushed out to the supply chain with greater dependency on integrated manufacturing and integrated innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's I think a lot of what you see is a lot of the bigger companies looking at what's core to them and maybe moving stuff into the supply base. And I think it's a great question as to the maturity of the supply base. Are they ready for that? So what we'll do is we'll use systems like MRL systems and actually supplier systems that look at the capability to make sure that they're capable of doing the job. But the process we're in right now is you hit the nail on the head, is model-based definition as an engineer is very easy. I can give you a model tomorrow of the stack of prints. Here's your model. What we need to keep working on is how do we flow those models out to the supply base, and how do we accept or not accept parts when they're used to working on 2D prints forever, right? So those are the challenges. I think it comes down to connecting that digital thread with the suppliers, engaging them on their quality systems to make sure the quality systems are harmonized. They aren't right now, and that's a big problem. And then there's this element of, don't treat a supplier as a supplier, treat them as a partner. They need to be helped from the engineering, concurrent engineering, versus just handing them a design and say, go make it. They need to be part of the design process, and I think that's the way, those are the steps you take.
Yeah, and just if I can, just because what's important is that you're hearing that the OEMs, we're evolving, we're transforming, and if you're a supplier in Connecticut, the writing's on the wall. Is that this is changing, and when you start to look at generative design and designing for assemblies, the suppliers that are able to make that change, and that doesn't mean they have to have all the same IT systems that we have, but they need to understand that this integrated model and being able to go and be part of the digital thread is the way things are going to be done in the future.
That's
Anything? Yeah, my comment on that question would be not as an EB employee right now. So in my past, having owned both supply chain and IT, I lived through the high-tech electronics growth, where it all moved to, instead of component-based, it was modular-based as we were selling to high-tech electronics, and the engagement with all subcontractors like the Selectrons, the SSCIs, the Foxconn Han-His, the Jabil Circuits. And I don't think the problems are going to be any dissimilar today. It is, one, making sure that you're treating them as a partner and not a supplier. Two, that there's visibility throughout the whole chain of the things that will be required to finish that whole module, and what technologies will allow you to see that visibility, right? So what's the true demand, and what then will also be the constrained versus the unconstrained forecast, right? And that information has to be shared very openly across all of the sectors so that you would know whether or not your production schedules are at risk and what should we do to adjust accordingly, but also what suppliers are going to be helping you build out that module. Where do they stand in the CMMCs, or where do they stand in the fact that they are meeting all the requirements as well? So again, I'm not specifically speaking of EB on this. This is just the background that I've kind of lived through over decades of standing up a lot of outsourcing to the subcontractors and the maturity it took to get them to a place where they were really delivering a high quality product.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. I had some closing remarks, but I don't feel they're appropriate at this point because I have some better information. Just based on this panel here, as we sit here in Connecticut, the one thing you should take away from here as well is that Connecticut has some of the best federal and state programs going. We just talked about model-based definition, digital thread technologies. There are very robust programs going involving each of these three companies in the supply chain. And we put on webinars, we put on demonstrations, so we're talking about these things. There is nothing more important than getting that supply chain capable. That's our survival. I mean, we've got it, and we've got hundreds, if not probably a couple thousand altogether, of supply chain companies that these companies are working with. So increasing their technical capabilities are huge. So I know we have to wrap up now, but thank you obviously to the panelists for your time. It was really insightful. Thank you to the audience, for your engagement. And we just have to continue to innovate. We have to innovate for our future. We don't want our adversaries, making the future for us. So it's in our hands. A lot of confidence in these companies, a lot of confidence in guys like Walker and different organizations that are out there helping to shape the future of Connecticut. So thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.